The second week box office numbers for Captain Marvel are out and finalised for the North American market, and it's not good news for Captain Marvel compared to Wonder Woman. As I've been predicting, Wonder Woman will have a higher North American box office gross than Captain Marvel, and that is certainly the case with what's happened after week 2. I predicted that Captain Marvel would end this week on about $285 million. I did increase my prediction to 287 after it had a little bit of an extra bump on the Tuesday. And the total for the second week for Captain Marvel actually ended up $286,477,835. So right in the middle of my two predictions, fairly close, about $1.5 million out from my first one, about $500,000 out from the second one. So this weekend I've already predicted that Captain Marvel will get around about $35 million for the Friday, Saturday, Sundays. A little bit under that, but let's call it $35 million. After the Friday numbers are out, it'll be far easier to project what will happen for the week. But at this stage, I'll predict that Captain Marvel will earn only $48 million for the third week. That lines up with around about $59 million for Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman will have somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million earned extra in week 3 over to Captain Marvel, and it will keep earning more money as we go on over the next 3.5 or 2.5 months, however long Captain Marvel actually stays in the box office for, which will allow Wonder Woman to earn more money than Captain Marvel. The graph here shows what I've just explained in a little bit more detail, or maybe much nicer to look at rather than just hearing about the numbers. The red line are the actual differences between Captain Marvel and Wonder Woman's box office at the same point in time, and the blue lines are my prediction. So again, that's over the next week. That's my week 3 prediction. That will change after Friday's numbers come out. If Captain Marvel earns more than $10 million on Friday, I'll have to revise those down, maybe drastically. Whereas if it doesn't earn $10 million on Friday, I'll have to revise them up. So let's take a look at the international numbers, or the total numbers international North America, see what we can make of them. As I've said, they're not fantastic to look at. I know that they are a big talking point from a lot of articles, and then everyone that's read it talks about them. But they are basically predictions, okay? They're predictions. Right now, they're inaccurate. This isn't new for Captain Marvel. This isn't a conspiracy for Captain Marvel. They're always inaccurate. They're always just predictions. If the numbers come out too big, they just keep them sitting there until a couple of weeks runs by until the real totals hit them. And if they're too small, they obviously just revise them up. But if you look at anywhere, let's say Box Office Mojo, you'll see that the numbers will have a whole pile of zeros at the end of the overseas or the foreign market. Okay, they don't have a real number. This is just a predicted number based on whatever it is they predicted by. Again, so it's not accurate. But anyway, if we look past that, something around about $825 million is what some of the larger, more, let's say, optimistic places are saying Captain Marvel is right now. So $825 million. If we look here on the actual totals for all of the films ever, Captain Marvel had an absolutely massive worldwide opening. It is the 8th biggest inflation-adjusted worldwide total ever. And as it sits right now, it is the 144th biggest film of all time. So $825 million gets to be the 144th biggest film of all time. It will obviously earn a lot more than $825 million and move itself up, but that is where it's sitting at this point in time after only week 2. One of the main takeaways is that the way the cinema business has moved over, I might say the last 20 years, but really over the last 50 years, is that more and more of the earnings come on the opening weekend. And so every film that comes out that's a large marketed film, a tentpole film, they get these massive box office openings. Now, Captain Marvel had a very big one. 8th is extremely good. But every film, as time progresses, year after year, they get bigger box office openings, and then they earn a smaller percentage after that afterwards. So it doesn't mean more people are seeing the films as such. It's just more theaters are made available, and everyone can see a film if they want to on the opening weekend. So Captain Marvel, 8th biggest opening ever. It's obviously not going to be the 8th biggest film ever or anything like that. If you look at the top of the chart here, the Infinity War had the largest box office opening weekend ever of $640 million. Absolutely massive. It's the 10th biggest film ever. I know a lot of places talk about it's the biggest film, but it's not. It is the 10th biggest film ever. Biggest weekend opening. If you look at some of the other numbers here, the second one on the list there, Jurassic World, second biggest opening ever. It's the 13th biggest film. Okay, Force Awakens, third biggest international opening ever. Force Awakens had the largest North American opening. Force Awakens made more money opening weekend than the Infinity War, but a worldwide third biggest, seventh biggest film ever. So there's a bit of a correlation there with the top three, but not so much. After the top three, things get drastically different and predictions go away. And they get so bad in that if you have a big opening weekend, it doesn't mean much other than if a film is marketed, you get a big opening weekend. That's it. So what can we predict from Captain Marvel's opening weekend from the first 3 days? Nothing. What can we predict from the first 2 weeks? Lots, everything that I've said so far. But from the first weekend, we can't really make anything from it at all. If we look at the fourth film there, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows #2, fourth biggest opening ever, 24th biggest film. So very different from Force Awakens. Fast and the Furious, Fate of the Furious, fifth biggest opening ever, 57th biggest film. Spider-Man 3, sixth biggest opening, 68th biggest film ever. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, 7th biggest opening ever, 77th biggest film. Captain Marvel, 8th biggest. Captain Marvel, I don't think, will become the 77th biggest film ever. It will not overtake Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince earned $1.14 billion. I think that's more than Captain Marvel earned. I think that's higher than what anyone's realistically predicting right now. The main predictions I think people are talking about are $1 billion. That's all they're saying. I do think 1.1 is possible. 1.14, I think that might just be stretching it a little bit, especially after Friday's numbers came out and they're a little bit soft. So I don't think it'll come there at this point. Again, after the weekend numbers come out, we'll really get a really good prediction after the third weekend as to what's going to happen. But somewhere after the 77th biggest film is definitely where Captain Marvel will be. See, underneath that, the Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End was the 9th biggest opening ever. It didn't quite get as much money as Captain Marvel did, a little bit off in inflation-adjusted terms, and it earned $1.2 billion, and it is the 50th biggest film of all time. Captain Marvel will not be that. Okay, Captain Marvel will not be the 50th biggest film ever. I don't even know if anyone is doing a realistic prediction of where it will end up in the actual box office. I haven't seen anything. I've not been looking that much. But the only things I'm really seeing are people saying $1 billion. It's going to get $1 billion. It's going to get $1 billion. Okay, if you just look down this list really quickly here of the largest openings, there's There's 4 films here that don't have $1 billion. Okay, we've got Batman vs Superman, which is, you could call the biggest flop of all times after the opening weekend. It's an absolute failure. It made a massive amount of money, $921 million, but that's basically a flop. That is a failure. Breaking Dawn Part 2, $939 million, and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the terrible 4th edition to Indiana Jones, $989 million. Oh, sorry, there's another one there, New Moon. I think it's a Twilight New Moon, $840 million. There's another big flop, again for a big chunk of money. So all of these films that have big opening weekends, they all make $1 billion, okay? $1 billion is nothing special for having a big opening weekend, and Captain Marvel had the 8th biggest. And so predicting or saying now that it'll make $1 billion sounds good. $1 billion sounds really, really good. Wow, that's a lot of money. It's not. If you are the 8th biggest inflation-adjusted film of all times, you should be getting something like 1.1, 1.5, $2 billion. That's what you're in line to do. And so Captain Marvel is failing nearly on a historic level. Not as bad as Batman vs Superman, but just about. That's what Captain Marvel's actually doing. Now, again, I use failure in quotes. It's making a massive amount of money. It's going to make a profit, but after the first weekend, Captain Marvel has underperformed, the likes of which haven't been seen since Batman vs Superman. But if you listen or read a lot of articles, they're saying that fantastic things we've never seen are happening, whereas the opposite is true. Captain Marvel is grossly underperforming on the world level, and Captain Marvel never performed well on the North American market. Captain Marvel is the 28th largest opening day in North America, and I do have another video saying, will it ever be the 100th biggest film in North America, which, funnily enough, Mrs. Doubtfire is number 100 in the North American market, and Captain Marvel will not beat Mrs. Doubtfire. So Captain Marvel opened the 28th biggest in North America. It won't get to be number 100. And Captain Marvel opened the 8th biggest film of all time in the world. It should make it in the top 100, but it's not going to make it into the top 60. As I said, it won't get the top 50, where the Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End is at $1.27 billion. No, Captain Marvel's not going to make $1.27 billion. It will not be the 50th biggest film of all time, but it is the 50th biggest hyped film in all time. It may be the first biggest hyped film of all time. Everybody's talking about how great Captain Marvel is doing. Captain Marvel's not doing good at all. Captain Marvel is essentially failing after its first 3 days in the box office worldwide and for North America. Here is what I believe to be the most accurate listing of the inflation-adjusted worldwide box office figures for films. I did have another video that missed a few films out. I didn't have international numbers for a lot of the old Disney cartoons, and when you get them in there, Walt Disney knew what he was doing. He made a silly amount of money off all that stuff from the late 30s, 40s, 50s. Anyway, if you include all them and things like Ben-Hur and so on, which I did in fact not have international numbers for, I have been able to get that there has been a total of 99 films ever that have earned more than $1 billion. So when we're talking about Captain Marvel could earn $1 billion, what we're saying is Captain Marvel could be the 99th biggest film ever. Now, if it does get $1 billion, it'll probably get a bit more than $1 billion, so it'll be better than 99th, but it opened at number 8. Okay, so it opened at number 8, and people are talking up. It's a big deal if it gets to be number 99. That's not a big deal. That is a gross failure from an excellent start. Captain Marvel's opening is fantastic. 8th, the biggest ever, is really good. Then where it ends up is going to be really bad. It's a massive disappointment after a really, really, really excellent opening. If we delve a little bit further into where the money is coming from overseas, the real answer is China. China loves Captain Marvel. China has got officially, over $130 million in Captain Marvel. So the Chinese market is propelling what is going on with Captain Marvel right now. The China market opened for Captain Marvel with $86 million. Okay, absolutely massive opening, and which obviously propelled it to be the 8th biggest opening of all time. $86 million. The Force Awakens, China opened to less than that. Okay, China opened to less money for The Force Awakens than its opening for Captain Marvel. That really shows actually where it is. And actually, I think the Force Awakens total box office from China was somewhere in the neighborhood of $125 million. So China has already put more money into Captain Marvel after 2 weeks than it put into Force Awakens in Force Awakens' $2 billion run. So that's basically what's happened here. Now, another country that loves Marvel stuff in addition to China is South Korea. And South Korea has put an abnormally large amount of money for its normal box office into Captain Marvel. The third country which really loves Captain Marvel compared to other films which they normally see is Russia. So Russia has got an abnormally large amount of money for what they normally go see films for. So does China, and so does South Korea, China being by far the largest market. And a few other films that are a bit notable are Mexico, Indonesia, and Brazil. So they're the countries that are propelling this forward in the overseas market, but particularly China. China just has massive numbers. The Last Jedi for China, I believe the entire box office run for the entire 3 months or whatever it was that it was in China for was around about $40 million. So China did twice as much money in Captain Marvel's opening weekend for Captain Marvel than it did for the entire run for The Last Jedi. So if you want to know why The Last Jedi failed horribly at the box office, yes, its North America numbers were very soft and weak, but the China numbers collapsed. So China hated the Last Jedi compared to what it thought of the Force Awakens, and South Korea also hated the Force Awakens. It also hated Last Jedi compared to the Force Awakens. So don't know why, but yeah, China hated the new Star Wars, and it loves Captain Marvel. China and South Korea generally like all of the MCU films more than they like other American tentpole films. Whatever the appeal is, they put more money in. Except for one, it sticks out a little bit. You can make off it what you will, but China and South Korea and also Japan really hated Black Panther. The Black Panther foreign numbers are very, very weak compared to its US domestic total. The US domestic total for Black Panther was actually better than the Infinity War total. So Black Panther is actually the most popular MCU film in North America. It is more popular than Infinity War, but internationally its numbers were very, very, very weak. Captain Marvel, I think, is getting close to its international numbers right now. So Captain Marvel way overperformed what Black Panther did, and for whatever reason, In particular, China, Japan, and South Korea hated Black Panther, and they didn't turn out to go see Black Panther. Here is the chart I've been showing quite a lot just to see how badly Captain Marvel flops from its opening weekend, or if it doesn't. I did originally say that it could go worse than Batman vs Superman. That is incorrect now. Captain Marvel will not fail anywhere near as bad as Batman vs Superman did. Again, I'm using these in relative terms. Batman vs Superman made over $900 million. I'm sure it made a profit, but after its monster opening weekend, it was probably projected to make something like $2 billion. And it didn't. It did make $1 billion. So Batman vs Superman is, in general terms, a massive flop, one of the worst flops in cinematic history, perhaps the worst. I thought Captain Marvel would overperform that or underperform that. I'm not sure which way you would say, but I thought it would earn less in relation, because I thought the film wasn't very good. But there's no competition for Captain Marvel right now, and obviously people disagree with me. They're going out to see Captain Marvel. So here's the chart here comparing Captain Marvel to Batman vs Superman, and you can see that Captain Marvel is clearly in front of Batman vs Superman, so it is not going to flop. If you project the current angle of the line outwards, you could say, oh, it's going to hit the Batman vs Superman line, but that's not true. The current little line there where it flattens out a bit, that's for the weekdays. Okay, the reason that all of these charts go with a high angle, then a flat angle, then a high angle, then a flat angle, then a high angle, that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the high angles, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the flat parts. So this is Thursday. Thursday's finished. It will now angle up. So it definitely will not hit Batman vs Superman. It will not get a total under Batman vs Superman by any means. But if you just look at this, you might think, oh, it looks like it's sort of flattening out and it'll hit at that. Most definitely will not happen. And here's another chart that I've been showing over and over again, just because you really get a good overview to see what's going on and what happens with lots of different films. We have Wonder Woman on here, we've got Captain America Civil War, we've got Batman vs Superman, and we have Captain Marvel in green. And you can see quite clearly there that Captain Marvel is somewhere at this stage in between Captain America Civil War and Batman vs Superman. Okay, it is not going to go underneath Batman vs Superman, but at this stage I do not see it going over Captain America Civil War. I believe it made about $500,000 more than Captain America Civil War did on Thursday, so it is very slowly catching it. It's very hard to tell on the chart if it's catching or not, but it is very slowly catching. And it will, or I say it should, I don't know about will, but it should get closer to Captain America than where it is now. But Wonder Woman is gaining on Captain Marvel at a far quicker rate. So although Wonder Woman had a terrible start, you can see the blue line here is it's behind all of these films, but it ended up overtaking all of them. Okay, well, it hasn't overtaken Captain Marvel yet, but I'm predicting that it will. So you can see, just looking at the chart here, Captain Marvel's going to end up between the yellow Batman vs Superman line and the red Captain America Civil War line. Okay, it's very clear to see. It's going to earn less money than Captain America Civil War unless something drastically changes in this angle, if some sort of event that makes a whole pile of new people see Captain Marvel. This is clear for anyone that has eyes to see. It will end up between the red and the yellow line. And as you can also see, the blue line ended above the red line. So somewhere along the way, the blue line is going to overtake the green line. It's going to cross over the top, and Wonder Woman will earn more money in the North American market than Captain Marvel. All of these figures are not adjusted for inflation. It just gets a little bit worse for Captain Marvel when we put inflation in, but without inflation, it makes it quite competitive to look at. So that's why it's interesting. So this will be a competitive thing to keep watching to see when and if Wonder Woman overtakes Captain Marvel, and also for all the people cheering for Captain Marvel, can Captain Marvel earn more money than Captain America Civil War? Okay, now Captain America Civil War got around about $1.1 billion, not adjusted for inflation, and that's been my upper figure for Captain Marvel, and that's basically why, because I don't think it'll go above Captain America Civil War. So if it does earn more than $1.1 billion, it'll be because it had more and more support overseas. So again, it's very difficult to predict all that stuff from overseas, plus the numbers right now may or may not be that accurate. But if the Chinese market keeps turning out for Captain Marvel, yes, it can keep earning something like Aquaman. Okay, Aquaman made a massive percentage of money from the overseas market. Aquaman essentially failed in the North American market, but for whatever reason, in the foreign market, it is very popular, and it kept going on and on and on again. So that's possible with Captain Marvel. I just don't think it is at this stage from what little you can tell. So $334 million is my predicted total for Captain Marvel's third week. We'll see how accurate that is in 7 days' time. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.